to make a video like this, where you are in some way claiming to be a victim of the system, is a little disingenuous. So a couple of days ago, MrWhostheBoss and MKBHD released a video called How Companies Manipulate the Media. And this is my reaction video to that. And, you know, if I were to change the title only slightly, I might say How Companies Manipulate Influencers. They gave 5 different examples of how companies manipulate the media, and I'm going to talk about them each briefly, but there's one that I'm going to focus on a little bit more, and that's where I really think we need to have the discussion, because I got to be honest, as much as I know that these guys are good guys, and I've, you know, at least talked briefly to both of them in different situations, so I'm not coming after them or anything like that. I do think that there's a little bit of a myopic thing that's going on with the way that they're going about their analysis. And I think it's important that we have this conversation where we go over what it is that they're saying and why it is not completely thought through. And so let's go ahead and do that.
Tech companies have figured out how to squeeze the most positive, favorable coverage out of YouTubers. One thing that seems to be increasing at an alarming rate is giveaways.
Okay, so number one, giveaways. I don't know that giveaways are really becoming much more popular. Giveaways have always been around. In fact, small YouTubers are offered the opportunity to do giveaways all the time. And I typically don't do giveaways very often because they're hard to administer, and ultimately, what really happens is you get a bunch of new people coming to your channel, not because they want to see your content, but because they want to get the free thing that you're offering. And once you give away the free thing, whether they get it or not, they are going to never come back. Giveaways are just bad business, but let's continue and see what Aaron has to say.
Companies have quickly realized that by partnering up with influencers like us to make giveaways as part of our review videos, they can massively reduce the negativity surrounding their products.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is the idea that since you're giving the thing away, you're tacitly saying that it must be good because you're giving it away, and by agreeing to do the giveaway, you don't have the opportunity to then do a review that says it's not a good product. But this is a self-inflicted wound. If you've agreed to do the giveaway, then you've put that pressure on yourself. As Aaron points out, if you do a giveaway of a product, you can't then review the product with any kind of credibility because you've already given the product away, which is a tacit admission that you at least think the product's good enough for you to give to your fans.
Okay, so the next version of this that I've seen is what I'll call the coming soon feature. The feature that gets announced on stage and makes a lot of headlines, and it gets people very excited and it's super impressive. But it's not ready yet. It's coming soon.
The coming soon feature. Now, Marquez gives a couple of examples of this. One being Apple with their Deep Fusion feature that was going to be part of the photo package, I believe, with the camera in the iPhone 11, but it wasn't ready yet, so it wasn't, you know, they didn't show it. They just talked about what it was supposed to be. And to hear him say it, basically, this is sort of, you know, manipulating the media, because everybody who covers this phone in those early stages before the feature is ready has to talk about the feature, and so therefore the company gets a lot of free press about that feature without anyone really being able to look at that feature and test it out. I have a suggestion when faced with this dilemma. Just don't talk about the feature. Don't talk about the feature. Like, say, Apple talked about the Deep Fusion feature that's coming to their Photos package later on this year. We don't really know what that is. They've talked about it, and we'll have to see what it's like when it gets here. That's how you can avoid the coming soon dilemma that Marquez brings up here.
It gets worse, because number 3 is the absolute fiasco that is embargoes. Now, an embargo is not in itself a bad thing. It's just basically when a company says, don't publish your videos before this particular time on this particular date.
This is the big thing. We're going to talk about embargoes. In fact, we're going to talk not only about embargoes, but dual embargoes. And so if you're not familiar with how the product review world works or anything like that, embargoes are basically, the company gives you a product early. So the people who are selected to get the product early have a couple of weeks to fool around with the product. And then when the embargo lifts on a certain day at a certain time, then everybody who has made a video because they've already had the opportunity to work with the product and know something about it releases their videos in a big multimedia onslaught. As someone who's been given early access to the product and agreed to partake in the embargo, you are not only releasing a video where you're reviewing the product, and we can talk about whether or not those kinds of products are actually reviews, but you're also a huge part of the marketing plan, because you and everybody else who throws out a video at 12 o'clock on whatever day it is and floods YouTube and all other media outlets with coverage of this phone is just basically free advertising for the company, because none of you are being paid, right? You're just being given early access. Now, let's talk about early access, and then we'll move on to the dual embargo thing, which Aaron actually thinks is the worst part of it. Early access is as good as currency. Being selected as one of the people who gets to have early access to the product is part and parcel to being paid, because you get out ahead of all the other people who haven't been selected. And why would the media not select some of those people? I mean, there are multiple reasons. What we're talking about here is bias. Bias is something that we all fall prey to. It happens to us all the time, whether it's in business or in our personal lives. We all fall prey to bias. And the bias that's operational here in this moment is what's called the in-group bias. And in this case, the in-group bias takes effect when you are one of the selected ones who are being given the access to the product that other people don't have access to. And by being selected by the group that you want to be a part of, you are then inherently risking falling prey to that in-group bias. As a viewer, as a reader of product reviews or whatever, I'm often very suspicious of people who were given that early access because they have personal relationships with the people who gave them to them. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they are likely to fall prey to this bias.
A lot of the time, companies abuse this system with something called a dual embargo. They tell reviewers, okay, when we announce the product, the only videos you can make are first impressions videos. If you want to do any kind of in-depth coverage or any kind of comparison, then you have to wait for the full embargo, which is a week or 2 weeks later. They'll use this to give you a whole list of things that in your first video you just can't say or show. This happens a lot. To make the launch coverage, the videos that most people will actually watch, artificially positive.
Now we go from embargo to dual embargo. The first embargo is one where you can't show the product, you can't show the software or something that the company doesn't want you to show. He gives an example of the Nothing earbuds, not wanting people to talk about fit or sound in an initial dual embargo situation, which they then got rid of for the giveaway situation. And then Marquez goes on to talk about a situation with the Microsoft Duo where, and a lot of reviewers did talk about this, they were allowed to do a first impressions video, but they could not actually turn the device on. So they couldn't show the software at all. They're giving this dual embargo situation as another reason why the companies are manipulating the media. But I have another solution to not being manipulated by the media in this case. If you are offered a dual embargo or a single embargo situation where you don't like the terms of what you're being offered, if you don't like that you're not going to be able to say anything of worth about the product, and you're going to give the company free advertising by publishing a video, then don't do it. Just don't make the video. And I know that a lot of people are like, well, they get this stuff, and so it's up to them. They can talk about it. They can do that. Yes. But when you're talking about two channels here with more than 20 million subscribers between them, they could easily say, no, I'm not going to do that. Just go buy the thing when it comes out like everybody else and then review the product. That's again where we get to this idea that the access to the product early is why these guys will do this, right? Because access is currency. It doesn't matter if money is exchanged. Access is currency. Getting that access, having it be valuable to your company, to your brand, to your, influencer, whatever it is, having that access will influence the way that you talk about a product. Because if you slag a product, more than likely that access is going to change, right? Now, maybe not for Aaron, maybe not for Marquez, but I know for smaller YouTubers like myself and other people that I know, there is an inherent pressure out there to play ball with the companies and not say something that might turn them off or that access will be pulled away. And that does affect your career as a YouTuber or as a journalist or a influencer or whatever you want to. I mean, keeping the companies happy is in your best interest.
Dual embargoes are gross, and they prevent journalists from doing their job.
Let's examine that last piece there for a minute. Dual embargoes are gross. He's right. And they do prevent journalists from doing their job correctly. However, having worked in media for 30 years in various capacities, as a writer, as an editor, etc., to my knowledge, most journalists don't agree to contracts that will not allow them to say this, that, or the other thing. Most journalists prize the whole idea that once they get the product, they can say what they want to say without being contractually obligated to say it or not say it. Journalists hold that as part of their integrity.
All right, so another one, and this one's kind of interesting actually, exclusives and interviews and things like that. It's sort of along the same lines as companies trying to turn organic impressions and evaluation into promotion for free.
Marquez goes on to talk about how he himself has had the opportunity to do many exclusive interviews and product launches and that kind of thing, where he's been the one who's gotten the exclusive look at stuff. And he goes on to talk about how a lot of times companies have now figured out that these exclusive interviews are not necessarily good for them in terms of being journalistic pieces of content, but marketing opportunities. And so he has tried often and gives the example of when he was working with OnePlus and interviewing Carl Pye. He gives the example that they wanted it to be more of a promotional thing for the OnePlus Nord, and he worked very hard to try and make it more of a journalistic piece in an interview than a promotional piece. And I give him credit for that, because that's very important, and it's great that he's aware that that's something that's ongoing and that he wants to push back against. Again, I don't think that being offered exclusives by companies is necessarily a bad thing, as long as you keep in mind what Mark has laid out here. The thing is, only a small group of creators are ever going to get offered these exclusive opportunities. So I put this one in the category of, okay, that's interesting, and I'm glad that you have these thoughts on your mind about what these things are for and how you want to present them, but this is not something that, the typical creator is going to have to deal with when thinking about compromising their integrity.
Okay, this one's really unfortunate. I want to bring your attention to out-of-context quoting. When I make a review of a product, I spend a long time crafting that script. If you just take one sentence out in isolation, it is not at all going to summarize the subtlety of what I'm trying to say. Late last year, I made a full review about that Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, and I titled this video The Perfect Samsung. I was kind of surprised to see that a week later, this title was sitting on Samsung's homepage. The Perfect Samsung. Those are my words, but when taken out of context, they mean something different.
He's absolutely right. Out of context quoting is something that is not a good thing. However, there are ways that you can get around this if you want to, but you're already working with the company, so you kind of have, again, that sort of conflict of interest. Do I make a stink about this and then risk my relationship with the company? Or do I just sort of say, hey, that's not exactly what I said. Wow, they shouldn't have done that. This is not something unique to the influencer. And this is not something that the influencer really needs to worry about if they know that their content will have the integrity to stand up to this kind of out-of-context quoting. These guys do bring up some good points, and a lot of this is and can be educational to the casual viewer, can be educational to other influencers, but it is not the whole story. It's the story from the heights of doing this, and it doesn't take into account what I believe is one of the biggest reasons why these influencers are often used to manipulate the media. They have a vested interest in having access to these products, and all of these examples that they give are tied to that vested interest. And since the companies have said, you are the people that we want to have getting access to this, it means that the company has already vetted them as safe. Now, with embargoes and dual embargoes and everything like that, you don't get to really see a completely unbiased, if that's a possible thing, you don't get to see a completely unbiased review from somebody who didn't have a relationship with the product or the company before the product ever comes out. You see the first impressions, you see the embargo review, but then 2 weeks later, after everybody else gets the product in their hands, that's when you have the opportunity to hear what real users have to say about the products. And maybe the YouTubers have had something to say about the various issues, this, that, and the other thing, but most likely not. Often they are, if spoken about at all, soft pedaled to the point where it's a criticism and you can call it that, but it's not harsh enough to dissuade the viewer from going away from buying the product. And that is where we really come into our problem. And this problem exists for all people who make videos or write articles or anything like that about products. But I feel like especially big influencers on YouTube and Instagram and other places like that have an especially egregious situation going on where they have these relationships that allow the companies to set the narrative for everyone that comes after. By the time Marquez and Aaron and Lou from Unbox Therapy and everybody else has had their early looks and reviews at these products, the folks who come after, the folks who used to be the lifeblood of YouTube, the reviewers that go out and spend their actual money on a product and bring it home and tell you what they think and what their experience has been like, those people, their videos are an afterthought. Okay? And yes, everybody has to pay their dues. And yes, that's just how it is. But to make a video like this, where you are in some way claiming to be a victim of the system, is a little disingenuous. You have decided to be a part of the system. You have agreed contractually in many cases to abide by the rules the system puts in place. I ask you, the viewer, do you think that early access period is something that should be considered when thinking about whether or not you can trust a reviewer? I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying that there are very many people out there who do a very good job of walking that line. But this video brings into sharp relief the real conflict of interest that exists between influencers and journalism. Every creator makes their own choices about how they're going to run their channel, how they're going to do their business. And access is very difficult to resist. There aren't very many people that do. It's just kind of buyer beware. Caveat emptor. Be your own judge of what it is that you're seeing when you watch these embargo videos or when you see these quotes pulled out and perhaps they're out of context. That's the whole reason I wanted to take a few minutes to react to this video. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope you got something out of it. Please do let me know if you did down in the comments below. I really appreciate you being here. My name's Jason, sometimes known as the JTL. This is Painfully Honest Tech. Tech so honest it hurts. Until the next time, I'm out.